I want you to think about the last time you were stuck on the 10, the 15, the 91, or even just trying to get across town and wondering who is actually responsible for fixing this. The answer is usually more complicated than people think. Today I'm joined by Aaron Hake, the Executive Director of the Riverside County Transportation Commission, better known as RCTC. Aaron grew up in Riverside County, has seen the regional change dramatically, and now leads the agency responsible for helping plan, fund, and deliver some of the biggest transportation solutions in the county. We talk about what RCTC actually does, why freeway projects are so complicated, why local funding matters, what smart freeways are, the reality behind toll lanes, and how transportation and habitat conservation are more connected than most people realize. So if you've ever wondered why these projects take so long, where the money comes from, or what the future of I-10 could look like for Calimesa and the Pass area, this conversation is for you.
Welcome to the Calimesa Insider Podcast, the official podcast of the City of Calimesa. Join City Manager Will Kolbow as he takes you behind the scenes of city projects, community stories, and the future of our hometown. Stay informed, stay connected. This is the Calimesa Insider Podcast.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Calimesa Insider Podcast. It's been a while since we've been here together. Things are busier than ever, so I've not had much time for the podcast, but I am excited to be here today with you as we are joined by the Executive Director of the Riverside County Transportation Commission, Aaron Hake. But before we get into that, a couple of housekeeping items. As I mentioned, things are busy, so we're probably going to slow down the episode cadence of the podcast a little bit. I'm going to try to do about one episode per month, but that even might be tricky as we head into the summer months. So if you're a subscriber to the podcast, you'll be able to keep track you'll be notified of new episodes. So make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or just hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube, and make sure you hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode. Because of our guests, we might have a lot of new listeners here, and even though this is the Calimesa Insider Podcast, I think you'll find a lot of educational material about how local government works no matter where you live. So if you want to know more about how cities work, this is the place. Coming up this Monday, June 1st, we have our regular City Council meeting. During that meeting, the City Council will consider the adoption of the fiscal year 2026-27 budget. So I encourage you to attend in person or watch live on YouTube at calimesa.gov/YouTube. The meeting is again this Monday, June 1st at 6 p.m. at the Norton Young Lev Senior Center. All right. Joining us today on the podcast is the Executive Director of the Riverside County Transportation Commission, Aaron Hake. Aaron is also the Executive Director of the Western Riverside County Regional Conservation Authority, which we'll talk about more in this interview. The City of Calimesa is a member of both RCTC and the RCA. Aaron, thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
Great to be with you, Will. Thanks for inviting me.
So for listeners who may not know you yet, can you first share a little bit about your background, how you came to RCTC, and maybe also just what's changed the most in Riverside County Transportation since you've started with the agency? I know that's a lot to start with right away, but just tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm going to start almost at the beginning. I came to Riverside County when I was 4 years old, and my parents were one of the many here in the Inland Empire that were trying to make a living in Orange County, found it to be very expensive. My dad was an Orange County Sheriff Deputy, and wanted to raise his family with a backyard and a home with enough space, a good school district, and basically traded a commute on the 91 into Orange County for that lifestyle. And I ended up growing up in Corona, went to Norco High School, and decided I wanted a career in public service after 9/11 happened, and knew that I wanted to be a part of the political process that made this country better. And so I decided to go to college back in Washington, D.C. at a school called American University. I got my political science degree and a philosophy degree there, And when I graduated there, after I interned on Capitol Hill, a couple of places to kind of get my feet wet, and decided that where I could make the most impact was to move back home to the Inland Empire, to the place where I got my opportunity and my start. And I was fortunate, about 9 months after I graduated from college, there was an opening at an agency that I had never heard of called the Riverside County Transportation Commission for a government relations analyst, for someone to help the commission look at and advocate for legislation that would be beneficial for transportation in Riverside County. And I thought that was a perfect fit for all of the public policy studies that I had done back in DC, and my experience being civically active as a high school student here in the community. And so I decided to move back. I was fortunate enough to land that sort of entry-level job at RCTC. And 20 years later, I'm very blessed, very fortunate to have been appointed to be the executive director of this agency. That's a very short story, but I like to start with that because as I'm leading this agency and doing work on behalf of all of the elected officials around the county who sit on the Transportation Commission, I am bringing with it my lived experience as someone who was raised here in this county, who remembers what it was like when you could still smell the orange blossoms, and depending on which way the wind was blowing, the cows in Chino.
Right.
And sometimes those smells would mix, and you could smell both the orange blossoms and the manure. And I remember what it was like when the 15 freeway had no traffic, when the 215 was, half the width that it is today. And there are people here that I knew growing up who would say they remember when the 91 didn't exist. So we've come a long way in a short amount of time, but I bring that perspective of someone who has seen this county urbanize, and who has been sort of part of that. I grew up with the county, and I'm really proud. I'm really proud of the place that we live. I'm proud of the place that it has become. But in all of that, I still consider myself a student of both public policy and learning about our communities. And I'm just very committed to making sure that we get our fair share from Sacramento, from Washington, and that all of our communities are heard, so that that we can reach our ultimate potential.
So you've seen, what RCTC has done over time, and having that perspective, I think, is really important. And it must be really cool to be able to really actually see the fruits of your labor, right? And knowing what it was then versus what it is now. People that are newer to the region maybe don't have that perspective. So I think that's really important. So I really appreciate that story. Yeah. But for residents who have heard of RCTC, but don't really understand what it does, would you explain RCTC's role, especially compared to the cities, the individual cities, the county itself, and even Caltrans?
Yeah, it's a great question. When someone drives out on the road, no one thinks about who's responsible for that road usually. And, on any given trip, you could be driving on a city street and a county road and a Caltrans freeway and maybe an RCTC express lane, all in one trip. So the Riverside County Transportation Commission is what's called a special district. We're not a city, we're not a county, and we're not the state, but the commission consists of cities, the county, and the state. The agency was created actually 50 years ago this year. In state law, there was a bill by a local legislator from Riverside named Walt Ingalls. And Walt Ingalls was the chair of the Assembly Transportation Committee, and he felt strongly that in Southern California, the counties needed to start to control their own destiny rather than let Sacramento sort of dictate what the transportation improvements here were going to be, and created these commissions like RCTC. And so our responsibility is for regional transportation planning, funding, and assisting, facilitating projects within cities like Calimesa or in your neighboring jurisdictions, whether that's a highway project, a public transportation service, active transportation infrastructure, which is bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and making sure that our region is compliant with all sorts of state and federal regulations that come along with the funding that we receive. But in short, it's our job to sort of look out for the local interest, look out for the regional interest, and make sure that the priorities of these communities are heard at higher levels of government. But the key thing to remember is, bring it up now, I'll come back to it later. One of RCTC's primary responsibilities is to administer a local sales tax that the voters have approved here in Riverside County called Measure A. Measure A was first adopted in 1989. It was renewed in 2002, and it may yet be again renewed this year, pending a commission vote in a couple of weeks. But it's a local sales tax that stays here in the county. RCTC is responsible for making sure that the promises made to the voters with that sales tax come to fruition. There's a discrete list of projects, and we can get into what that is and how that works.
Okay. So, yeah, and you mentioned, that RCTC works on a variety of different types of transportation, whether it's highways, local roads, rail, transit, commuter services. You touched upon express lanes, how the funding comes together, and also environmental mitigation, which we'll get into later. So what are some everyday examples of RCTC's work that Riverside County residents may use or benefit from without realizing it?
Yeah. So you may have driven on a freeway today, and you may see a little white tow truck driving around, and on the side of it, there's a shield, a blue and yellow shield, a triangle and a circle, and it says Freeway Service Patrol. And in very small letters under it, you'll see the letters RCTC. Freeway Service Patrol is one of the most popular things that RCTC does, and it's one of the most cost-effective and best use of taxpayer dollars I can think of any government program. Freeway Service Patrol is out on our busiest freeway corridors to pull you off the side of the road if you break down on the freeway, if you get a flat tire, if you run out of gas, if there's just a mechanical issue, and there is no charge. And this is not a replacement for your insurance or AAA, but our job is to get you safely off the road and keep other motorists safe as well. It is a hazard, of course, if a car is broken down on the freeway. Get you to a safe place where then you can call home, call your insurance, call AAA, whoever. But that's something that a lot of people don't realize that we do, that you probably see every day out and about.
Yeah, I see those trucks all the time driving on the 15, and that's funded by Measure A, correct?
It's funded actually by what's called the Service Authority for Freeway Emergencies. There's a $1 fee. If you look next time to register your car, there's a $1 fee that you pay on there, and that comes back to RCTC for us to implement that program.
Oh, okay. See, there, I'm learning things today too.
Yep.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
So the RCTC recently updated the traffic relief plan. That was something that I believe Ann Mayer came at one point to talk to our city council about. And so, what is the plan? Why does it matter for the public, and how should residents think of it about the mix of freeway improvements, local transportation, and other projects that are in that plan?
Yeah, thank you. So the traffic relief plan is a 30-year vision for Riverside County's infrastructure. Within that 30-year vision, there's about $30 billion worth of projects that we know that we need. And that vision is a compilation of every community, every city and county coming together and saying, here's what we know that we need in Riverside County for the growth that we know that's coming, for our economic development goals, for our quality of life and community goals. And we put that all together into one plan. We call it the Traffic Relief Plan, to try to address what we know is coming. We know that by 2050, we're going to have another 500,000 people here in Riverside County, whether we build infrastructure or not. And so we feel a duty to the public to say, here's what we think needs to happen. And this what's in the plan. There is rail to the Coachella Valley from LA through Riverside. There is extending rail down the 215 and then out into Hemet and San Jacinto. There is ensuring that we continue building out expansion of I-15 down to Temecula to the county line in San Diego. Interchanges on Interstate 10 all through the San Gorgonio Pass, including in Calimesa, Banning, and Beaumont. And widening the 10 through that area as well. We know that the 10 and the 60 interchange, and especially where the State Route 79 at Beaumont Avenue hits the 10, is a huge bottleneck, but there's not funding for these things. So we have identified projects like that all around the county, whether it's Temecula, Hemet, Corona, Jurupa Valley, Calimesa, rail, bus, highway. And we've put it all out there to the public for comment for several years. But maybe we'll talk about this in a minute. We need the funding to build it all.
Right. And that's, that was going to be my next question about funding. So one of the things the plan talks about is that local funding can help unlock state and federal funding. Mm-hmm. So, and this is something I've talked about on the podcast as well, is that these major infrastructure projects are never funded by a single source. So can you explain why local dollars often are needed to compete for grants and deliver these major projects?
Absolutely. So you're absolutely right, Will. Any infrastructure project, it's just like, baking a cake. You have to have all the ingredients. And if you don't have one, it's not going to turn out. You're not going to get the recipe at the end of it. Funding's the same way. So the way funding works for infrastructure projects typically is that the state and federal government today consists of a minority part of the projects we build. It used to be the other way around. It used to be, we get 80% of our money from a state or federal source, and the local piece was the smallest. It's the other way around now. And what the state and federal government want to see when you apply for a grant to them, they want to see that you've done all the work to get the project ready to construction. And they want to see actually that you've got most of your construction money there so that they're the last dollar in. They want to know that if they fund your project, it's going to get built. It's going to get built on time. It's going to get built soon. At the end of the day, everybody wants to take credit for, the ribbon cutting, the big celebration. But they want to see that you did all your work and that you've invested. When I say you, it's you, Will, at Calimesa. It's me at RCTC. They want to see that we have prioritized this project, and that this is our most important thing. They have confidence it's going to get delivered. So, in order for us to get those funds, we need a local source that gets them, engineered, gets them through the environmental process, buys all the right-of-way, the land to build the project. And then we can go to Uncle Sam or to Sacramento and say, hey, we're almost there. Why don't you help us across the finish line?
Right. So, talking about freeways in particular, and that's something that is a big hot topic in our region, just given how spread out we are and, the commutes, we've talked about that. And so a lot of people assume that because freeways, they most of them understand that those are Caltrans facilities, they're state highways. Yeah. So they assume that Caltrans must be the agency building these, funding these. But why is it that RCTC or even sometimes local, agencies, cities in the county, why do they take the lead on major freeway projects in the county? And how does RCTC and Caltrans divide those responsibilities?
Yeah, well, thank you for making sure we clear this up. So at a very basic level, Caltrans is the State Department of Transportation, and they are the owner and the operator of the state highway system. So in Riverside County, that's the 10, the 91, the 15, the 60, 74, 79. If it's got a number, that's a state highway. And and it's owned by Caltrans. RCTC's role, we have a planning and funding role for capital projects, not maintenance, but just, things to build out the system, to expand it. Our role is to sponsor projects to add to that system. And Caltrans, if they choose to, can let us do that. There's a permit process, there's an environmental process. But Caltrans's focus really is on operating the system, making sure that it's safe, making sure that, it's up to a state of good repair. Caltrans is not in the business of widening freeways. In fact, there's a lot of state policy today that discourages the state and actually discourages agencies like ours from adding lanes to the freeway system. They're really focused on what they call fix it first and finding alternate ways for people to get around other than driving in a car on a freeway. So our role at RCTC, I should mention this, every city in Riverside County, all 28 cities, has an elected official that sits on my commission. So everyone's represented, as well as the entire board of supervisors if you don't live in a city. It's their job to prioritize the local, state, and federal funds we have to decide which projects are we going to advance and propose to Caltrans or propose in a local jurisdiction.
Right, and I'm glad you mentioned the actual commission itself. And so I'll mention that our representative for Calimesa is our council member Linda Molina. So she's been on the commission for quite a while.
Yes.
So thank you for mentioning that. One project that has intrigued me, and I think it actually has intrigued Councilmember Molina as well, is the I-15 Smart Freeway pilot project down in Temecula. So can you explain what a smart freeway is and how it's different from adding another lane? How does it differ from traditional ramp metering? And what are you doing as an agency to watch and determine whether the pilot works?
Yeah, this is exciting. So we're recording this on a Thursday the May 28th. Tomorrow, the 29th, I think the day this might get posted, we're doing the official switch-on ceremony of this I-15 Smart Freeway project down in Temecula. So I'll be headed there in just a few hours. So what this project is, it's a pilot project. It's an experiment, but it's an experiment that's proven successful in Australia and a few of the metro regions there. And it's been tested out in the Denver metro area. This is the first in California where we're using this technology. Let me explain what it is. There are, at the end of some on-ramps to the freeway, you may notice there are red lights. And I'm sure they annoy you. When you get to them, you're trying to accelerate onto the freeway and you hit a red light. Well, guess what? That annoying red light is there for a really good reason. When that light is on, that means that there's probably some congestion on the freeway. And what that light is trying to do, we call it a ramp meter, it's trying to control the amount and the frequency of cars getting onto the freeway so that the cars that are getting on don't further back up the existing traffic on the freeway. Because if 10 cars just come in all at once and there's no space on the lane, that lane is going to jam up and it's going to have this ripple effect backwards. And that's one of the ways you get a traffic jam. So this Smart Freeway pilot project is intended to make these ramp meters much smarter and actually talk to each other and actually talk to the freeway because today they don't interact. In Australia, this system called Coordinated Adaptive Ramp Metering in the Melbourne metro area has increased the capacity of the freeway by as much as 20%.
Wow.
By simply adjusting how cars get on the freeway. And there was a study a few years ago by the Western Riverside Council of Governments, another government agency in our area, that studied traffic on the 15 freeway in Temecula, where it gets jammed up northbound. People coming home from San Diego in the afternoon. It gets really bad. Anyway, found that there is enough capacity on the freeway to handle all the cars there. They should be able to keep moving. and found that a lot of the traffic there in the afternoon is caused by people in Temecula going to Temecula or going from Temecula to Murrieta. It's local traffic that are using the freeway as sort of a big main street. And so our theory is that if we're able to basically create this freeway technology system that coordinates when cars can get on and off the freeway in a sort of more scientific manner, the merging will be smoother, the backups will be less. We hope to have less accidents as well. Mm-hmm. And we're going to see if this will reduce congestion on that northbound I-15 commute.
So how would you measure how do you measure that what are some of the metrics that you use to evaluate that?
Yep. So we I haven't seen the dashboard yet, but there's this. What we've been doing is we've created a real-time dashboard that we'll be able to monitor how the traffic is performing, what the throughput is, how far the backup is. We've actually been testing the system for quite a while, and we've been gathering data in the meantime. So we've had several months of sort of baseline data to see what it's like without the system turned on. And then we're going to turn it on and then measure what happens to traffic flow, what happens to speeds, what happens to accidents, how long are the queues, do we still have a backup, but maybe it's, it only lasts 30 minutes instead of an hour. So we're going to be measuring all those types of things. And we're going to do a before and after analysis. The pilot period's 2 years. But we'll be looking at the data in the meantime. We're not going to wait 2 years just to see if it worked. We'll be making adjustments after we turn it on.
And I would imagine that if it does work as intended, it's probably a much more cost-effective measure than a lot of other alternatives, right?
Yep, absolutely. So, everyone who's listening, we fathom these numbers. To add a lane of freeway, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on how long it is. Billions of dollars. Our big 91 improvement several years ago was $1.4 billion in 2017 dollars. The I-15 expansion that occurred a few years ago was $400 million. A project like this, we're only talking tens of millions of dollars and much less impact in terms of construction, disruption to the public. So it could be a very, very cost-effective solution.
That's great. No, I'm excited to see how that turns out. I'll be watching it closely and hope that our residents and listeners will be as well. Yeah. Another tool in the tool box, I guess you could say, are express lanes, and you mentioned those earlier. And those can be quite controversial, and I think that there are, in my opinion anyway, and I've actually talked about this, I've did a podcast episode on this subject, because there's a lot of misunderstanding surrounding those. So at the most basic level, why do toll lanes exist? How does dynamic pricing help keep traffic moving? And quite frankly, how do you respond to concerns like, I already paid for these lanes. I pay taxes already, so why do I have to pay again? These are just Lexus lanes. How do you respond to some of those? I'll just characterize them as misnomers. Yeah,
absolutely. So I'm glad you did a podcast just on this. I want to listen to it now. I'll start with just a couple of really blunt myth-busting statements. There's no such thing as a free lane. Every lane, just like your house, you have to pay for it, and then you have to pay for maintenance. You have to pay for the mortgage. The freeway lanes that everyone thinks they have, quote, paid for, you're still paying for them through the gas taxes that you pay or the sales tax that you pay that goes back to the highway system. Potholes need to be filled. Guardrails need to be replaced. Slabs need to be replaced. So we are always paying for the system. So that's the first thing. There's no, they're called freeways. It's kind of an unfortunate name in my opinion. But to get back to where this started with talking about toll lanes and express lanes, yes, it's another charge. But that money, what that does on the express lanes that RCTC has built on the 91 and the 15, that goes to pay for the construction of the lanes. It's like a mortgage. You're paying the mortgage on those lanes. They would not exist but for the tolls that are being paid on them. And those tolls pay for the operation and maintenance of those lanes. And one thing that's really important, I want to make sure that your listeners know here and take to heart, is that those funds stay local. Those funds stay at RCTC. They don't go to Sacramento. They don't go to DC. They are managed by the commission, and you can look at our budget. You can come to our public meetings. You can see our toll policy. Those are all adopted in Brown Act, transparent meetings. And our obligation under the law is, with those toll revenues, we have to first pay back the debt that we incurred to build them. So again, that's the mortgage. Then we pay for operation of the lanes. Then we pay for maintenance of the lanes to make sure they stay in a state of good repair. And then after that, if there's any money left over, and right now the 91 and the 15 are producing a surplus, then by law, we are required to reinvest those funds back into further transportation improvements within the corridor where that money's collected. So if you drive the I-15 express lanes in Corona or Norco or Jurupa Valley, those funds, any net revenue after all those expenses, we have to put into more transportation improvements on the 15. So it's actually going to generate further improvements. And those don't have to be on the freeway. They could be on an interchange. It could be on a bike lane. It could be on bus service. It could be on a new signal or a stop sign where there's a safety concern in the I-15 corridor.
Right. And the other question I was going to ask is, you're still adding capacity by adding that. That is one of the few tools we have left. From what I understand, basically the only thing you can really build on a main line are express lanes or truck lanes. I mean, that's really the only thing that the state seems to be allowing to go forward. And even then, it's a very heavy lift to get them to approve those. Yeah. But by adding that capacity and taking those drivers that otherwise would be in the main lines, still helps those that are not using the toll lanes, right?
Absolutely. And yet, Will, you're right. It's an uphill battle to get any new lanes approved on a state highway these days, just the way the state's environmental policy is. But what we call them are managed lanes. So basically anything that's not a regular general purpose lane, we call a managed lane. It could be a truck lane, like you mentioned. It could be an express lane that's tolled. It could be a carpool lane. So there's different types of managed lanes, but those are the only lanes that really are being added, other than what we call like operational or auxiliary lanes, sort of short segments that might allow for someone to get on the freeway and accelerate, or to decelerate to get off the freeway.
Okay, so I think that hopefully that clears it up for some of our listeners, because I know that's something that you probably get a lot of feedback on, and it's probably pretty frustrating at times, because there's a lot more to it than those kind of simple statements. So switching gears a little bit, you also oversee the Western Riverside County Regional Conservation Authority, or RCA. So what is the RCA, and what is the Multi-Species Habitat Conservation Plan, or MSHCP? Sure. Yeah. And why does a transportation agency oversee a conservation authority? Where does that correlation?
Yeah. So Will, one of the great things I mentioned at the beginning, that I grew up here, and I remember when there were orange groves and dairies, and the hillsides were, there were no homes on them, one of the things I think that's great about Riverside County is all the open space that we have. And Calimesa is one of those places. There are some amazing open spaces in Calimesa.
Yes.
And more than just being beautiful landscapes for us to enjoy with our eyes, or sometimes with our feet if we go out on a trail, or if you're an equestrian out on a horse or on a bike, they're habitat to species that exist nowhere else in the world. This area of the planet is a biodiversity hotspot. So we're also very privileged to live in a place where there's a lot of wildlife. These are birds, these are plants, and there's just too many to talk about here on this podcast.
Right.
But it's an amazing place, and as this area is growing, there's this sort of natural tension between preserving the environment and what we have and providing a place for the people and for the economy. And in Western Riverside County and in the Coachella Valley, there's a similar plan. We have found an innovative way for these two things to coexist. And it's become a model for the entire country. In Western Riverside County, we have one of the most ambitious habitat conservation plans in the country. And the whole idea here is that we have all agreed, that all of the cities and the county have agreed to set aside land in a very meaningful way. Our goal is to have a 500,000 acre reserve, and we are well over 80% of the way in assembling that. We still have a long way to go. But this reserve is designed in a scientific way that allows the species that are here to move in their natural wildlife corridors or to exist in the place where they belong, rather than doing like piecemeal mitigation, where if you're building a house over here, you put the mitigation over there, but it's not connected to where the rest of this species lives, and it doesn't really help that species thrive. So we've come up with a way to map out, where does the conservation occur? Where does the development occur? Where does the transportation occur? So we've kind of made these pre-agreements so that when we're working through the regulatory process with our partners at state and federal wildlife agencies, they can say, yep, you're taking care of the mountain lion, the bobcat, the burrowing owl, the Kino checker spot butterfly. That's a fun one. There are certain species I could list off. There's 146 of them we cover. But they can say, look, you've taken care of this by participating in this plan where you're going to purchase land, and the funds come from development fees. So every time someone constructs a building here in Riverside County, they pay a mitigation fee, comes to the city, comes to us. We buy the land that needs to be preserved. And I think the last question you asked is, why does a transportation agency manage it? Well, one, transportation benefits from having this plan, because in order to build out our road system, we have to, go through habitat and mitigate for habitat. But also, our agency is designed to deliver projects which requires purchasing land. We have some sophisticated expertise in real estate, and it's just something we're really good at.
So it's basically kind of economies of scale in a sense.
Basically.
Yeah. So in fun fact, you mentioned that Calimesa does have a lot of open space, and that's something that we're very proud of. The RCA is the single biggest landowner in Calimesa.
Wow.
And it will probably always will be. We have 25% of our total space in the city, our total square mileage, that is going to be permanent open space, and most of that is owned by RCA. So we're very proud of that.
That's outstanding. I did not know that.
Yeah. So for Calimesa and San Gorgonio Pass residents, how should they understand the importance of I-10? I-10 goes right through the middle. For as much as we love our open spaces, we also have this freeway that goes right through the heart of our city.
Yep.
And so how should they understand the importance of I-10, the long process required to deliver freeway interchange projects, and what small cities like ours can do to make their regional transportation priorities more competitive?
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt that I-10 is a lifeline for the San Gorgonio Pass, just as it is for the Coachella Valley and for San Bernardino County. And then you get into LA. It's a nationally significant corridor. It's a regionally significant corridor and a locally significant corridor. So Calimesa sits, right on a very, very important piece of infrastructure and needs it. But it's heavily impacted. We know that. There's growth happening to the east of you, to the west of you, and right where you're at. And that freeway was not built to handle what it's got today, especially the interchanges. Mm-hmm. And the ons, and for, that's the technical term here, for the on and off ramps, the bridges that go over the freeway, they were built for much lower volumes of traffic. And when traffic didn't move as fast as it does today, or for all the trucks that we have. So it is a challenge for your community, as it is many others, to sort of maximize its potential with this aging interstate right in the middle of it. Measure A, the sales tax I spoke of earlier, does include funding for improving the 1060 interchange. Project development work has not begun on that. However, we have in recent years started looking at the concept of express lanes on I-10 in this area. Mostly looking at the impacts that occur on weekends or during the peak season when folks are going to and from the Coachella Valley. But we know it's becoming a daily issue, and we have been helping the cities of Beaumont and Banning. They've asked RCTC to help deliver the Highland Springs interchange on I-10, and so we're trying to move along with that. Your question about what can Calimesa do to make your projects competitive, I think it's what you're doing with Cherry Valley, for instance, is you're getting that new interchange designed, you're getting it ready for construction, because going back to the earlier part of this conversation, you're most competitive when you're ready for construction and you can say to the state federal agencies, hey, we're almost there, will you help us finish it?
Right, and as far as for construction, we probably will be knocking on your door. So hopefully that will be soon. Yes. Couple more questions just to close this out. First of all, kind of a fun one, maybe. Yeah. What is one thing that you wish the public understood, either about your role or about RCTC's role and what they do? One thing that you just want to get off your chest that is a burning question that seems to be misunderstood that maybe we haven't covered today.
Okay, that we haven't covered. Because you have covered some big ones, which is the express lanes myths. And I'd have to say, Will, I would want the public to know that RCTC is your advocate and your voice. We are the ones trying to solve the problem with you. And, yes, we're government. And I know government doesn't have a great reputation these days. But this is a government agency that its sole purpose is to solve problems and to deliver projects. And to deliver the projects that the voters have said to us, here's your money, here's what you're going to do with it. So, our motto is promises made, promises kept. If you look at Measure A and you say, you can see the list of projects, you can see exactly what we're supposed to do with it. And I can tell you that's what we're doing. So I would just say that I would invite the public to participate in our process, to let us know your experience. Not at all afraid to talk to folks or to hear about their pain points on the transportation system. We want to hear what people are going through so that we can do our best to represent you.
That's great. That's a great message. So last question: if a Calimesa resident only remembers one thing from this conversation, what would you want it to be? And well, I guess this may be two questions. Yeah. And where can they go to learn more or stay engaged?
Remember that the pothole on your street that's getting fixed probably comes from RCTC's Measure A, or from the city's, it's probably a combination of the city's, capital improvement plan, or from the sales tax you're paying through Measure A. And that we are accountable to you. We hear you. We want to hear you. And the way you can find out what we're doing is rctc.org. We're on social media as well. All of our handles are at the RCTC, THE RCTC. And if you want to find out about the traffic relief plan, which you talked about earlier, Will, that's real easy, trafficreliefplan.org.
All right. That's awesome. So thank you, Aaron, for joining us. Thank you for taking the time. This has been very informative. And like I said earlier, I even learned something today. So I know our listeners have learned a lot from this conversation. So we really appreciate you joining us.
Oh, Will, I'm so honored you invited me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And there he goes. And with that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you again for joining us today. If you're new to the podcast, please take the time to subscribe so you can be notified of future episodes. We are here. We are on YouTube for full video, the full video podcast, and we're also on all major podcast platforms like Apple Podcast and Spotify, if you prefer the audio version of the podcast. If you want to learn more about local government, I put together a YouTube course called Local Government 101, which you can find on our YouTube channel. If you want to learn more about how cities and local governments work, the course is a curated playlist of episodes that cover a wide variety of topics that try to demystify the level of government that has the most impact on your day-to-day life. The podcast is also on Instagram and TikTok, so be sure to follow us there as well at Calimesa Insider. I hope you have a great weekend, and we will see you next time. Take care.